Okay, we should be good. We should be good now. Sorry about that. So my program was having trouble with transition scenes. I don't know why, but here we are. So in an ironic twist, CNN released a poll, and in that poll, to qualifying for the New Hampshire primary debates, one step closer to not even having to get a delegate in Iowa in order for her to qualify for that debate. CNN is actually what allowed her to be one step closer to the New Hampshire primary debate. Now, I know that sounds all well and good and all that good stuff. Here's the problem with that, though. CNN is also the same organization this week, not even a week ago, that denied Tulsi Gabbard the ability to actually perform in a town hall event in New Hampshire on February. Bro, really? Listen, this is how bad it is. CNN's numbers. Tulsi Gabbard has 5%, right? Cool, whatever. Andrew Yang is getting a town hall event. Andrew Yang is tied with her at 5% in the CNN poll. Tom Steyer also getting a town hall event. Tom Steyer is 3 points behind Tulsi Gabbard in New Hampshire. Mike Bloomberg also getting his own town hall event is in New Hampshire. Deval Patrick is 5 points behind Tulsi Gabbard, according to CNN's own polling. Will Tulsi win one delegate in Iowa? She was 5%. Yeah, and I'll explain that in a second. I know some people are having some issues with understanding how that goes. I explained it in my last video. But basically, to make a long story short, it's not just 15% overall. It's one of two ways. It's 15% in a singular precinct. If you get 15% in a singular precinct, you keep the delegates from that precinct. If you get 15% overall, but not 15% in a single precinct, you still get to keep those delegates. So that's the important distinction that needs to be understood. So Tulsi can literally just get 15% in one precinct, and she gets a delegate. But something's telling me for some reason I think she's actually going to do better than that. But anyway, so according to CNN's own polling, Tom Steyer below Tulsi, Yang tied with Tulsi, Bloomberg below Tulsi, Deval Patrick way below Tulsi. They all get town hall events. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, where is Amy Klobuchar at, right? Because Amy Klobuchar is killing it in New Hampshire, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, Amy Klobuchar at 6%, 1% higher, 1 point higher than Tulsi. Now, this poll has a 4.3% margin of error. 4.3%. So you know what that means, essentially? It means that Amy Klobuchar is statistically tied with Tulsi in New Hampshire. So that's 5 people getting town hall events that are either statistically tied with Tulsi in New Hampshire or actually losing by a significant margin to Tulsi in New Hampshire. Isn't that beautiful? Now, if CNN wanted to make the argument, right? We're going to give Bernie Sanders, who's at 25%, Joe Biden, who's at 16%, Pete Buttigieg, who's at 15%, Elizabeth Warren, who's at 12%. We're going to give them a town hall event because we consider them top tier candidates based off of the criteria that they actually, they actually are outside of the statistical margin of error for our poll. If you wanted to make that argument, I would say it's stupid because people who need exposure should be getting the town halls, but it would at least be consistent. At least that, right? But no, that's not the case here. Why is that? This is what election rigging looks like. When people say, what is election rigging? How are all the different ways that you can rig an election? These are the ways. Through media, through ballots, through machines. I'm praying for her to get one delegate from India. We all are, because we know that she definitely gets into the debates if she gets one delegate anyway. But this is more so just a testament to how rigged our system is, how in the pockets of the Democratic Party CNN is, how adamant the Democratic Party is, the liberal establishment, the foreign policy establishment is of Tulsi Gabbard and what she brings to the table. Now, what makes this poll even more interesting, this is why I don't trust polls, right? The reason we go over polls on this channel, I can't speak for everybody else. We go over polls to expose the flawed methodology, the flawed logic in using polls to qualify anyone for anything significant when trying to decide the outcome of an election. And of course, this isn't going to be any different. Now, yeah, Tulsi's at 5%, which places her statistically top 4 with the 4.3 margin of error. But here's the problem once again. Any margin of error over 4%, any margin of error over 4% actually usually renders that poll useless. And as you've probably figured out by now, yes, every single DNC debate qualifying poll has been statistically useless. Yes, absolutely. That's by design. Here's where it gets better though. Now it starts off saying we have this many thousand people. What is it, 16? They had 16,000? No, I lied. No, 1,176 primary voters. You're like, wow, that's a lot. Then they even go on to say, look, man, we even asked Republicans and independents, et cetera, et cetera. And you get excited. You're like, okay, 3.2% margin. Oh, wow, okay. Then you start reading. Once again, you got to start reading through the methodology. The methodology here says, but we only ask likely Democratic primary voters. So that number goes from 1,200 to 560 or something like that. Or 597, I believe it was. Let me see. I'll make sure I'm telling you the truth. 394 and 516 is what they have. 516. Now that number sounds pretty low, don't you think? Also, shouldn't you be asking potentially, well, if this particular candidate, if you had a chance to vote for this candidate, would you consider voting for them, even if you're a Republican who traditionally has voted in the Republican primaries? Things like that matter, but they didn't ask that. They specifically made it likely registered Democratic primary voters. It gets better though. So I was confused at the math here. And if you are listening to this, feel free to do some math for me, because maybe I'm just confused and I do suck at math because I suck at numbers. So they said that this poll includes 516 people. Right? And even when they're asking specifically about who you're going to vote for, 516 people. Do this math for me. What is 377 plus 79 plus 31? Let's do the math. 377. That's 377 registered Democrats plus 78 independents or non-party preference plus 31. That's 486 people. That's 486 people. That is in the category of likely Democratic primary voters. Where the hell did you add, what's that, 30 people? Right? 516 minus 486 is 30, almost exactly. Really super specific number, right? 30 people. That's a lot, don't you think? Where the hell are they at? Because you just said you only have 486 people that you asked in this poll that are voting in the Democratic primary. So where the hell are the rest of the people at? Where did you get these 516s from? They don't say. I scoured through the poll, doesn't say. Now some people would ask, well, why is that a problem? I'm gonna tell you in a second. Hold on. Trying to do some math here, y'all. I mean, y'all, chill. I suck at math, so I gotta concentrate. But make sure I got this right. Okay, so 30 people added. 30 people added to the poll could potentially change the outcome of the polling by about 7% any which way. Because we don't know. So 7% could mean, just if you're a Yang supporter and why you should care about this, 7% if you're a Yang supporter, according to the CNN poll. It says here that Yang is at 5% in CNN's poll. 7% could mean that you are tied with Elizabeth Warren, and potentially that Elizabeth Warren is getting beat by you, like getting smacked by you. That's what that could mean, because they added 30 people, which means they could have added 7% wherever the hell they needed to make it look like somebody's doing better or worse than what they're actually doing. Dennis Gibson, thanks for the super chat. Please briefly repeat what is that issue here. I just got online and Tulsi is my president. Thank you. So basically, Denise, CNN last week, if you remember, less than a week ago, said that they will be hosting a town hall event and Tulsi Gabbard is not invited. However, Deval Patrick is invited, Tom Steyer is invited, Amy Klobuchar is invited, Andrew Yang is invited, Mike Bloomberg, they're all invited. Yeah, except for this week, CNN, just today, within the last 24 hours, I should say, they released a poll where Tulsi actually is now one step closer to qualifying for the New Hampshire primary debates, even though they're saying she doesn't have the statistical significance to be included in a New Hampshire town hall. And literally, she's doing better than 4 of the candidates that are getting town hall events, according to CNN's own numbers. Yeah. So we're dealing with people. And then, as I just explained to them, I did the math just now, just to make sure I was on point here. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you're just tuning in, this CNN, like here we do the polling analysis we do, we're not giving quote unquote credence to the polls, just explain to people all what you need to be looking at patterns wise, like what narratives you should and should not be buying into, and what narratives you can actually get out of the polls, especially when it comes to rigging it in favor of certain candidates. Here in this poll, like I was just saying, they start out telling you it's going to be 1,200 people asked, with the margin of error of the original margin of error, 2.9%, which by the way is fantastic, except for then they say, well, actually, but we're only going to ask likely Democratic primary voters. So that number jumps down to 516. And that sounds good, right? Except for they write out the number for the total number of registered Democrats, total number, by the way, of registered independents, which is kind of weird, don't you think? Considering they only had 78 total independents in this particular poll, and yet New Hampshire is known for being an independent, like dominated state. And then there were 31 Republicans, so 377 registered Democrats, 78 independents, 31 registered Republicans that are all planning on voting in the Democratic primary. Now that number doesn't add up because it only adds up to 486, not 516. Roughly, that's about 7% if you round up. 7% added onto the final number of 486. Because their claim is 516, so 30 added is about 7%. Now, if that's the case, everybody should be a little pissed off, because that's 7% that can be distributed however you want it to be distributed. 30 people in a poll that is only claiming to have questioned 516 people is a little statistically significant, don't you think? Considering the margin of error in that particular part of the poll is 4.3%. So literally, the amount of people added to the poll is greater than the statistical margin of error. That is huge. Yang's trash healthcare made me firmly Bernie Tulsi. Yeah, I mean, I thought we already knew that Yang was trash on healthcare. But, I mean, that's cool. So, and like I said, and this is CNN's poll. So, we know they don't like Tulsi, for one. They will say and do whatever they have to manipulate the outcome of a poll. I don't know how else to tell y'all that. They will say and do whatever they have to manipulate the outcome of a poll that could potentially gain momentum. I mean, if you were paying attention in 2016, I have to say this over and over again. If you were paying attention in 2016, you would know how big of a deal corrupt polling is, and how and why it was so ludicrous to begin with to try and use polling to determine whether or not a candidate should make the debate stage. It was ludicrous. But once again, here specifically, Tulsi is statistically in the top 4. That is in a establishment curated poll. So this is, I'll say the same thing as I always do. The election is not going to go the way you think it is. Even the you know how they got the numbers for it. So the other poll was NBC News. NBC News has Tulsi at 6%. Make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, NBC News has Tulsi at 6%. And in 5th place behind Klobuchar, Warren, Buttigieg, and Bernie and Biden. But once again, you gotta be like, okay, what's the sample size? Well, the sample size is I had to reload it. The sample size is 700. Oh, excuse me, 697. So the margin of error jumped up from their original number, which is 2,604 people asked in the NBC poll. Then it turned out that only 697 of them were likely primary voters, and so the statistical margin of error jumped up from 2.4%. Oh, excuse me, 3.8%. My apologies. To 4.5% in that poll. So once again, statistically, just based on the rules of polling, statistically Tulsi is 4th place again. Again, statistically. Because these numbers just get reduced and reduced and reduced to the point where their margin of error makes the polls useless if you're just trying to figure out who's, maybe not 1st and 2nd, depending on what's going on. But if you're trying to figure out who's 3rd, 4th, 5th, these polls are useless to a degree. They're somewhat useful, but mostly useless. And the people asked in this poll, they had to have been called and had responded to a survey by Dynata, however they pronounce it, which was formerly called Survey Sampling International. In other words, these people have to be people who have already registered for a prior survey service for the NBC poll. How many likely New Hampshire primary voters do you think, especially the new ones? So that means, you know what that means, right? These are people who probably would never get called, because a lot of them are like people who vote for Tulsi or even Bernie or even Yang. These people wouldn't get called if they're new. unless they had time to register for this survey service before, which they probably did not. You literally, it says it in the methodology. You would have had to have participated in a survey from this company to even have a chance of being asked. How the hell are we using these polls to qualify people, you know, to run, to basically get a chance to run for the highest office in the nation? Ah, man. It's gonna be interesting. Like, the good news for Tulsi, if you're a Tulsi supporter, which I am, and the good news for Yang, if you're a Yang supporter. Hell, I guess it's good news for Bernie too, right? Is that literally they're making up numbers. I told you, I just showed you the CNN numbers. I did the math right in front of y'all. They're making up numbers. They're making up numbers. Their methodology is highly flawed. Their margin of error is absolutely ridiculous. And then on top of all of this, on top of everything else, according to their own numbers, only 30% of them are sure who they're voting for. Oh, excuse me. It said 30% of them are kind of sure who they're voting for. But even then, it's like 15% of them, or like half of that 30%, are absolutely sure they're voting. Like, absolutely sure they're voting for that person. So like, yeah, they're like confident. There are 30% of people who are confident who they're voting for, but they can still switch, according to CNN's own polls. So when you couple the margin of error with the type of people who are being asked, with literally making up numbers, like literally making up numbers, with this incessant desire to ask everyone but the Republicans, like, and it's like we're not in an open primary state, bro. Like, we're in an open primary state. Open primary, bro. This is why if you hear anybody talking about polls, if they're not talking about the facts within those polls and helping you understand like what that means in the grand scheme, then it is what it is. I hate how people place so much emphasis on polling, like when it comes to ranking, because I was part of Bernie's 2016 campaign. I was the acting state director for North Carolina until they brought somebody. I literally ran Bernie's campaign for North Carolina until a month and a half before. Then they hired somebody because I was like bogged down running my school's chapter for Bernie Sanders, and then the colleges, the state colleges together. Like, I was bogged down with all that stuff. So we did not look at polling. We didn't look at polling because after the first couple of polls, we knew that this doesn't make any sense. How can we have these numbers, this much excitement, this much turnout, right? They're gonna tell me that Tulsi has 5% of 518 people who are voting for her, and yet I see a room full of 500 people at her town hall like 2 days ago in New Hampshire, in a small town in New Hampshire. Come on, bro. I guess. We didn't look at polls in 2016. Unless it was to laugh at them. Because you know what happens if you look at polls in 2016? Well, Bernie Sanders was at 2% in Iowa in November. By November, Bernie Sanders was at 2, maybe 5%, depending on what polls. Optimistically, 7%. Hillary was dismantling everybody. Bernie and Hillary tie in Iowa. Statistically, according to the polls, Hillary was destroying Bernie in Michigan. That was supposed to be a walk-off home run for Hillary Clinton. Bernie destroys Hillary Clinton in Michigan. There were states that had them eventually close to the point where, okay, cool, you thought Bernie was going to win, but it was the beat down was so bad. I think there were about 2 to 3 states where this happened, including Vermont, where Bernie beat her down so bad she did not get one single delegate from that state. So we can't, like, that's why I say, if we're talking about polling, we got to talk about polling the right way, not just the, oh, my candidate's doing well, oh, that means all the polls are legit now, right? No, because it could mean your candidate is doing better. It could mean other establishment candidates are not doing as well as they're pretending. And what polls do, because once you start accepting, oh, well, Bernie's at 25%, for example. Oh, he's at 25%. Then you have to then accept, once again, then Biden's at 22%. Really? We really going to believe that? Really? Then you also have to accept that this entire time in a state where Bernie beat the living shit out of Hillary in New Hampshire, that at any point in this race, Biden was beating Bernie in New Hampshire? Really, bro? Y'all believe that shit? Because that's what you have to believe. If you're one of the people all of a sudden placing credence in these polls, then you have to accept that Bernie has been beating Biden, or excuse me, Biden has been beating Bernie in every early primary state until like 3 days ago. If you believe that, then you shouldn't be giving any commentary or trying to educate people on that, or give any analysis on this race. Because that's what you'd have to believe. But then what you don't understand is what you were doing is inadvertently manufacturing consent for rigging, because Bernie can't just beat, Bernie just can't beat Biden. Tulsi even can't just beat, to make sure they're out of the picture, can't just beat Klobuchar or beat Pete Buttigieg. They have to steamroll them. If Bernie gets, say if Bernie and Biden are the only ones who get delegates in New Hampshire, clearly that's not the case, but let's just say if that's the case. If Bernie gets 48% or 49% and Biden gets 45%, that's a loss for Bernie. That is not a victory. And what you were doing when you were accepting this ridiculous notion that is not substantiated by crowd turnout, that is not substantiated by enthusiasm or excitement, that with a candidate who has zero crossover appeal, where not a single person has been like, man, you know who really won that debate? Joe Biden. What you were doing is saying that it's okay, that 49%, as long as I got that 49%, Biden can get that 45%. That basically means they just tied the state if you're in New Hampshire. That keeps Biden's campaign alive. That makes him look stronger than he actually is. But unfortunately, the Democratic primaries specifically are like, the Democratic primaries specifically are like the stock market. It's all speculation. And when something looks good, people got to buy the stock. And they usually buy the stock in the next state. So if you inadvertently allow momentum to be gained, even by getting close to Bernie, for example, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're keeping Biden in the race longer than he should be, which means you're giving the establishment someone to unite behind in the long run to rig against Bernie. And by accepting at any point, right, if you're accepting that Bernie is beating, if you're accepting the polls only because Bernie is doing so well now, then you have to accept that they were accurate then. You have to accept that in a state where Bernie wiped the floor with Hillary, winning almost, I think he won almost 100% of the independent votes. It was insane. It was crazy. He wiped the floor with her. You would have to, once again, accept that at some point Biden was beating Bernie in New Hampshire with no explanation other than Biden's the vice president, or was the vice president. Doesn't have the turnout, doesn't have the grassroots fundraising numbers, doesn't have the volunteers, doesn't even have the staff on the ground. Didn't have the debate performances, hasn't had a single positive viral moment. And you would, once again, to accept that these polls are accurate now, because your candidate is winning would mean you have to accept at some point that Biden was beating the crap out of Bernie in New Hampshire at one point, that Biden was beating the crap out of Bernie in Iowa at one point, which if you have any common sense, you know that's not the case. Denise Gibson, thanks for the super chat. We the people no longer have a democracy. The candidate of choice has already been decided. The rich have our entire government in their pocket. It's time for a real revolution. Hey, you're not really gonna get an argument out of me. I mean, I think it was a Harvard or a Princeton University study found that we are literally an oligarchy. And basically what we're seeing at this moment is a facade of democracy. Remnants of a system that really has not worked. My only faith that the system is somewhat intact, which is crazy to say this, but it's a fact nonetheless. My only faith that the system is intact is that Trump beat Hillary Clinton. Because Hillary Clinton was by far the most unpopular candidate in history. Trump by far had some of the most enthusiastic rallies. Whether or not you like them is irrelevant, but it's just the raw facts. His rallies mirrored Bernie's. What happened to Hillary with Donald Trump is what would have and should have happened, but didn't happen because Hillary cheated Bernie. So like I saw, wow, okay. So Trump had the numbers. Trump had the grassroots support. Trump had all the independent commentators and those people behind him. Trump had the movement. Like you got to accept it. He was polarizing, but so was Bernie in a way. But Trump had the populist right. Like Bernie had the populist left. And it led to the obliteration of Hillary Clinton. And what we know now is that that's what should have happened with Bernie. So like, even though clearly the process was rigged in the Democratic primary, I'm like, okay, so there's some semblance of a democracy left. If as awful as that man can be, his popularity translated into a victory over someone who is clearly less popular than him. Does anybody have any other questions before we head up out of here? I think we're good. Sorry, y'all, my throat's dying, man. I was crying a lot yesterday with the news of Kobe and his daughter, so my throat's killing me. But the show must go on, right, people? The show must go on. Brent, the RNC does have super delegates, but they are way less impactful. Way less impactful. Yeah, Aurelius, I would say that the reason she doesn't answer questions about student debt forgiveness, I would imagine, is because once that debt has went into like basically the finance side of things, right? Like you're done with school and all that good shit. I don't think she quite understands how it works completely. So she doesn't want to make a guarantee that she can unilaterally do something, even through an act of Congress to a degree. Because it's forgiveness, right? You're not talking about paying off the debt, like Congress approving a debt payment. That's not what we're talking about. We're literally talking about just a forceful forgive. And I imagine she doesn't know if we have the actual authority to do that. Right? You get what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I like the plan that Bernie is talking about. I agree. We should forgive all student debt. And Tulsi believes that college should be free, which we can do, right? We can do that at the point of service. But once the services have already been rendered, do we as a government have the right to just tell a financial company that, hey, get over it? Do we even have that right? And I think that's why she's very careful with her words, because she doesn't really want to, make a promise she honestly doesn't even know if we have the power to keep. Vote early by mail? No. Do not do that. Do not vote by mail if you live in that state. No, do not do that. Vote early on a machine, on paper ballot, handing it in. Do not vote by mail. Vote by mail will go to the establishment every single time. And Pasta is going to do a video about all the stuff he's learned about vote by mail just in California alone. Tulsi failed when she Iran does not love Trump. I don't know where you got that shit from. Bro, you got to stop watching propaganda. Stop watching propaganda. That is the dumbest. You just, no offense, but that's dumb. That is really, really, really stupid. That is so ridiculous. Iran has been victim of regime change after regime change after regime change at the hands of our intelligence community and past presidents. And you're going to sit here and tell me, oh man, with this attempt to pin everything on us and start a war that our people are going to have to fight, they all love Trump now. Bro, come on. I'm sure that's exactly what they said when they overthrew Mossadegh. Those Iranians, they love us. Look at all those protests. They love us. They just really appreciate the fact that the CIA is stepping in to overthrow a democratically elected president so that we can have control of their oil again. They love us. No, they don't love Trump. Come on, bro. Mike Gravel's coming on tomorrow. I made that announcement on Twitter like 3 days ago. Mike Gravel's coming on tomorrow at, where's my list at? I think 2 or 1. I'll be making another post about it. But yeah, Mike Gravel's coming on tomorrow. Live, baby. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm excited about it. Tulsi doesn't insult our intelligence by promising legislation the executive branch can't affect. You're correct. And even like I said, you're talking about student debt, bro. It's crazy that people think I like the idea that Bernie is pushing forward, but there is a level where you have to question, okay, Bernie, are you even sure you can do this? I love it when people are like, oh, forgive 100%, forgive all student debt. Okay, I mean, I don't know how you're gonna do that. Medical debt is actually more probable because a lot of medical debt or a lot of hospitals are actually under the control of the states or cities in their regions. So that's possible. That's something that we can work with. Medical bankruptcies are a thing, like the government allows it. And so these are the things that we can possibly work with. What we cannot work with, what I'm not sure we can work with is literally a service was rendered that is 100% voluntary. Unfortunately, I know it's really not, I get that, but a service is rendered that is by definition of voluntary, 100% voluntary, where you get the choice to go to whatever school you want and accrue however much debt you choose to accrue. Then that debt is handled through a financier, a debtor. I don't know if after that service has already been rendered, right? I do know he can make school free from here on out, but I literally do not know if we as a government have the power, or if it's even just to exercise the power to demand that private financial institutions cancel all student debt. I would love that, but I'm in this weird phase of I'm still a pragmatist, and I always look at the implications of things like that. Wow, okay, if they can cancel student debt for us, doesn't that mean that they can once again, because we know they've already bailed out the banks, right? With imaginary money. And I was not okay with them bailing out the banks at all. So if we begin to set that precedent, let's just cancel everything. Let's just cancel everything. Not canceling everything through the cooperation with the financial institutions by paying the debt off. If we pay the debt off, that is something that is very possible. But I don't think that Bernie says that. Bernie is literally talking about canceling the debt, which is a whole different thing that might require government overreach that I'm not sure we have the capability to do, and I'm not sure if we should be doing that. We have to, you know, like the debt should be paid, and then we should make sure it never has to be paid again. It's like war. We can't just cancel the multi-trillion-dollar deficit. Would it be nice? Of course. Should we do it? No. But if you paid back the deficit, it's not canceling it. But pay back the deficit and make sure it never accrues like that again, then we're having a different discussion. So, yeah. Pretty sure Bernie means federal loans. Nah, he don't just mean federal loans. He made it very clear, canceling all student debt. He made it very clear. Plus, federal loans don't account for that. I mean, it counts for a lot, but federal loans is not what's running that law school bill up. Federal loans is not what's running that medical school bill up. Those are private loans from the institution itself or from private lenders. Like, trust me, as somebody who just went through the process. Man, a lot of hard work. Bro, once again, maybe you're looking at something completely different than I saw. But I'm gonna be real with you. Even Fox Business. Fox, this is his network. They were like, yeah, some people in the upper middle class and some people who are super poor will temporarily benefit for their tax returns. But ultimately, the rich, the super wealthy benefit, and the few benefits that a few people are getting, this is according to Fox News, are only temporary. And the circumstances actually have to be pretty, like, either pretty bleak or like your upper middle class, which that is a disappearing demographic in the United States. The super rich though, the super wealthy, oh, they're good. Yeah, 100%. The question really shouldn't be did a few Americans benefit? The question is, why were the overwhelming benefits felt by the super wealthy if he's supposed to be a man of the people? Because Bernie could do a tax plan that worked out decent for the middle class, but if his tax plan overwhelmingly benefits the wealthy, then I'm going to be questioning his motives as a man who would campaign as being, working class, grassroots. We're going to take care of you all first. We're going to build the economy from the ground up, rather than using trickle down economics. Like, that's the questions you got to ask. Like, who is he helping? He's helping his friends. So, but overall, before I started like doing this full time, I could tell you my tax returns were worse. Now, caveat, I'm in Florida, so it's a little bit different for federal tax returns. It's a little bit different because we don't have states taxes, so our income when we report it is a little bit higher. Like, it's calculated a little bit higher, so that could be part of the reason why. Who knows? I don't know. But my fiance's tax returns were significantly less after making a little bit more, like where she should be getting a higher return. She got a higher return, much higher return, making less before Trump became president. And then the average this year, actually, she got a little bit more, but we don't really know what that is attributed to yet. But a couple people said, like, people who have to pay back money in taxes, they're saying mixed things. I've heard some people say, I'm paying less, but because the itemized deductions have increased. But if you're one of us poor people, then you're not, itemized deductions don't really mean a damn thing to you. You trying to get some credits back, homie. And that is where a lot of people are getting hurt, is the credits. Itemized deductions are great for people who have things to deduct because they have money to buy the shit. Just saying. So we got any more? Gravel, Marcus. Oh, Marcus, you sent a super chat? What the hell? Am I correct that Byrne will primary anyone against Medicare for all? That's what he says. That's what he says. Regulations are bought by a lobbyist. Yes, because no lobbyist works to deregulate. The deregulation of Wall Street was totally not done at the behest of lobbyists. I'm 100% sure of that. Every argument that you can use to say that benefit is help, or that Trump is helping you, like you have to think immediately, okay, but hold on. Do lobbyists actually work to hurt Wall Street or help Wall Street too? Because that's a fact, clearly. How do you think the banks got bailed out? Like even with Iran. Oh man, these people love Iran. Who's saying that? Trump and everybody who loves Trump. You know what Trump was also saying? That the protests in Venezuela were anti-Maduro protests, but then Ben Norton, Aaron Matei, even Abby Martin and Mike, they were on the ground. They were pro-Maduro protests, but he was claiming them, the large protests, as anti-Maduro, pro-Guaido protests. So like every argument that you can say that is basically strictly propaganda based, regardless, like my argument that nobody is protesting for Trump, if I just left it at that, that would be strictly propaganda based. Unless I string together some other critical facts that we do know about our history with that particular country. Then like the picture is put together. It's like, okay, what are the odds that these protests are actually pro-Trump? That's context. So as far as that question about Bernie though, he says that. I gotta see him, like I want to believe that, but I really gotta see him stand up to the DNC more. Gotta see it more before I believe that. It seems like he stands up to the DNC when he's personally, like even then he doesn't really stand up. But like if he could personally benefit from it in the public eye, that's when he stands up to the DNC. Every defense is a calculated one. So what happens when Nancy Pelosi doesn't back Medicare for all? What happens then? You don't go campaign against Nancy Pelosi? What happens when Debbie Wasserman Schultz doesn't support Medicare for all? You don't go come down here and support Tim Canova. You already abandoned him once. But now because it serves your agenda, you'll go campaign for him? Like, I doubt it. I doubt that you're going to go after the party's power brokers and primary them. I just don't believe that yet. I wish I could. I genuinely, Bernie from 2016, probably. Calculated Bernie for 2020, who I still love. You know, I love his policies, but I question his fervor. I question his convictions. I don't know. He'll primary some no-name that can't get him kicked out the party and heckled by the Dems. But it's hard for me to believe that when Nancy Pelosi pulls up to the scene and is like, I'm not doing shit for Medicare for all. It's hard for me to believe that Bernie Sanders will go out to California and San Francisco and challenge Nancy Pelosi. Sucks. Can you talk about the doomsday clock? Oh, I actually have a video coming out about the doomsday clock. So just be a little patient on that one. I was supposed to do it yesterday, but with the death of Kobe Bryant kind of messed up a lot of my plans. So, all right, people. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to head out. Give me some rest. I got a long day tomorrow. I got to catch up from yesterday. Good God. Thank you all so much for tuning into that live stream segment of Mika Says Sukasa. And always remember, more than anything else, ladies and gentlemen, find your balance. Peace. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell if you like that segment of Mika Says Sukasa. Of course, if YouTube is giving you trouble, as it always does, you can download the Rockfin app and follow us there. Also, if you want to continue to help our show grow, you can help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon and donate as little as $1. Really, anything helps. Other than that, always remember, people, more than anything else, find your balance.